For 2 decades, I've watched Stoicism sweep through modern culture like a wildfire. Silicon Valley executives quote Marcus Aurelius in boardrooms. Self-help gurus package Epictetus as the cure for anxiety. Young men recite Amor Fati as if it were a magic spell against suffering. I've spent 58 years studying philosophy, not in ivory towers, but in the streets of Athens, the markets of Istanbul, the monasteries of Tibet. And I need to tell you something that might disturb those who found comfort in Stoicism's promises. This ancient philosophy, so celebrated for teaching emotional resilience, carries within it a shadow, a dangerous potential to not strengthen your relationship with emotions, but to sever it entirely. Today, we're going to explore what the Stoicism industry doesn't want you to see, how a philosophy of emotional management can become a philosophy of emotional annihilation. This isn't about dismissing Stoicism, it's about seeing it completely. Let's begin with honesty. I understand Stoicism's appeal. God, do I understand it? In my 30s, after a devastating divorce, I discovered Seneca. His words felt like armor when I needed protection most. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. It was intoxicating, this idea that I could simply think my way out of pain. Stoicism promises something irresistible: control. In a chaotic world, it whispers that you can become unshakable, invulnerable, that emotions are merely judgments and judgments can be changed. Master your thoughts, master your life. But here's what I learned in the decades since, what I witnessed in myself and countless others who embraced this philosophy. There's a razor-thin line between managing emotions and murdering them. The Stoics taught apatheia, freedom from passion. In Greek, this meant freedom from destructive, irrational passions. But in practice, in the hands of desperate modern seekers, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a license for emotional amputation. Let me share something from my journals. A conversation I had in Prague 5 years ago with a 28-year-old software engineer named Marcus. Yes, Marcus, named after the emperor himself. Marcus told me proudly that he hadn't cried in 6 years. His girlfriend had left him, his father had died, he'd been fired. And through it all, he'd maintained stoic equanimity. He quoted Epictetus, "It's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things." I asked him, "Do you feel anything?" He looked confused. "Feeling is the problem," he said. "This is the dark metamorphosis." Stoicism teaches that we should examine our emotional reactions, question catastrophic thinking, distinguish between what we control and what we don't. This is valuable. This is psychological wisdom. But somewhere in translation, from ancient Athens to modern self-optimization culture, examine your emotions became eliminate your emotions. Don't be controlled by feelings became don't feel. The Stoics themselves understood that emotions contain information. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about his grief, his frustration, his weariness. These weren't weaknesses he was confessing, they were human experiences he was processing. But modern Stoicism, especially as packaged for men seeking strength, often strips away this nuance. It becomes a philosophical justification for what psychology calls emotional suppression. And the research on this is unambiguous. Emotional suppression doesn't eliminate emotions, it buries them, and buried emotions don't die, they rot. They rot and poison everything around them. Here's what the ancient Stoics didn't know because they couldn't. Emotions aren't simply cognitive judgments we can logic away. They're complex neurobiological processes involving the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, the entire limbic system. When you experience fear, your body is preparing for threat. When you feel joy, you're being rewarded for behavior that promotes survival and connection. Sadness signals loss and triggers the need for support. Anger identifies boundary violations and mobilizes defense. These aren't bugs in the human system, they're features. Millions of years of evolution didn't give us emotions as obstacles to overcome. They're survival mechanisms, social signals, sources of meaning. When you systematically train yourself to override these signals, you're not becoming stronger, you're becoming disconnected. From yourself, from others, from reality itself. I've met Stoicism practitioners who can sit calmly while describing traumas that should shatter a person. They speak of dead relationships, broken dreams, profound loneliness, all with perfect equanimity. And they believe this is wisdom. But I've looked in their eyes. I've seen the flatness there, the absence. They haven't transcended suffering. They've numbed themselves to being alive. There's a difference between a calm lake and a frozen one. Both are still. Only one is dead. Now let's address the territories where Stoicism not only fails, but actively damages: love, art, and moral outrage. First, love. The Stoics advised against excessive attachment. Epictetus suggested that when you kiss your child goodnight, you should remind yourself that they might die before morning. The intention was to appreciate the present. But the effect? It's rehearsing loss instead of experiencing love. Real love requires vulnerability. It requires the willingness to be destroyed by another person's absence. It requires irrational commitment, foolish hope, and yes, attachment. The deepest human connections aren't formed by those who've mastered detachment. They're formed by those brave enough to be wrecked. Second, art. Creation requires passion, the kind the Stoics viewed with suspicion. Every great work of art comes from someone who cared too much, felt too deeply, couldn't let something go. Stoic equanimity produces competent philosophy. It doesn't produce the Sistine Chapel or Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. The creative fire that transforms culture doesn't burn in those who've achieved perfect emotional regulation. It burns in those consumed by vision, by longing, by divine madness. And third, moral outrage. Some things should disturb your peace. When you witness injustice, cruelty, oppression, the appropriate response isn't serene acceptance, it's rage, it's grief. It's the kind of passionate disturbance that moves people to action. Martin Luther King Jr. wasn't stoic about racism. Gandhi wasn't emotionally detached from colonial violence. The great moral movements of history were led by people who couldn't achieve equanimity in the face of evil. And thank God for that. So if not Stoicism, then what? I'm not suggesting we abandon emotional regulation. I'm suggesting we look at traditions that honor the full spectrum of human feeling while still cultivating wisdom. Consider Buddhism, often confused with Stoicism, but fundamentally different. Buddhism doesn't teach emotional suppression. It teaches emotional awareness. Feel the anger fully, watch it arise and pass, understand its nature. But don't identify with it. Don't let it control your actions. The emotion is honored, experienced, and released, not denied. Or look at the romantic philosophers, Rousseau, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche. They understood that emotions aren't obstacles to truth, they're pathways to it. Some truths can only be accessed through feeling. Some wisdom requires you to be broken open. Modern psychology offers us emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize, understand, and work with emotions rather than against them. This isn't weakness, it's sophistication. It's the recognition that the goal isn't to feel nothing. It's to feel appropriately, to let emotions inform without overwhelming. I'm 58 now. I've lived long enough to see the cost of emotional suppression in my own life and in countless others. I've also lived long enough to see the beauty of emotional maturity, which is something different entirely. Emotional maturity isn't about achieving constant calm. It's about developing range, the ability to feel deeply and think clearly, to be passionate and wise, to let your heart break and continue forward. The Stoics were right about some things. We do catastrophize. We do suffer unnecessarily through rumination and false beliefs. We do need to distinguish between what we can control and what we can't. But they were wrong about the solution. The answer to destructive emotions isn't no emotions. It's better emotions, refined emotions. Emotions in service of love, truth, beauty, justice. If you found comfort in Stoicism, I'm not asking you to abandon it completely. I'm asking you to examine it honestly. Ask yourself, am I managing my emotions or am I murdering them? Am I becoming stronger or am I becoming stone? Because here's what I've learned in my decades of seeking. The goal of philosophy isn't to make you invulnerable. It's to make you more fully human. And being human means feeling the grief and the joy, the fear and the courage, the anger and the love. The ancient Greeks had a word, eudaimonia, human flourishing. Not happiness, not pleasure, not even peace, flourishing. The full expression of human potential, and you cannot flourish with a dead heart. Don't let philosophy, any philosophy, convince you that your emotions are the enemy. They're not. They're the proof that you're alive, and life in all its terrible beauty demands to be felt. I'm Adrian Vale. Thank you for sitting with these difficult questions. If this unsettled you, good. Philosophy should disturb comfortable lies, especially, the ones we tell ourselves about strength. The Stoics taught that we should live according to nature. Perhaps the most natural thing of all is to feel, deeply, honestly, courageously. Don't be afraid of your heart.